Okay, we'll start Bill Harwood.
Bill Harwood, CBS. For Senator Glenn, watching you walk off the spacecraft yesterday, I was struck by you were obviously walking a little stiffly, and I was thinking, well, I'd probably walk that way if I was 77 coming back into Earth's gravity after 9 days. But how did you feel? Can you describe what it felt like to come back into Earth's gravity? How difficult was it to walk down those steps? Just your general impressions.
Well, a little difficult, and obviously I was walking a little spraddle-legged yesterday to keep my balance a little bit. But everything went very well. We went through all the medical tests yesterday, and as far as I know, everything's coming out very well so far. We will go back, and we have the next 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks, that, as Kurt said, we'll be going through very extensive medical tests. And we're already on body collection fluids and things like that already this morning, and to follow up on yesterday, and we'll be doing that for the next several days. The sleep experiment, Shockey and I go into that tonight. We arrive in Houston, we don't even get a night off back there. We go into that sleep experiment back there. We'll be into that one night, off one night, back into it 2 nights again. So we're hard at it again on all the follow-up to everything that happened on the mission. But I think when you come back from something like this, you feel maybe a little bit woozy when you come back in. I'm probably 95 or 98% back to normal now. I'm not just whipping my head around quite like that yet. But that'll come over a day or so, I guess, and feel great.
Mort Dean at ABC. Wait for the mic.
Senator Glenn, you were a combat pilot, test pilot. You're an astronaut, senator, presidential candidate, 77-year-old. Did you learn? Did you learn anything about yourself during this mission?
Oh, I don't think you could be on a mission like this without learning a lot about yourself. It's such a new and different experience. I was up before, of course, way back in '62, but this is different this time, and where you free float, and if we were all in a spacecraft right now, you'd all have to be tied down, or you'd all be floating up off the pressure points that are on your tail ends there, and you'd be floating up toward the ceiling. And so it's different working in that kind of an environment than it was before, where I couldn't do that. So it's the research, though, that was on board there. Some of the research involves, well, all the research involves exactly that you're in microgravity or zero G, and enables you to do some things that learn new things that only can come in that environment, and learn some things about ourselves, too. It's a different personal experience. When you have the fluid shift and you feel like you're fat-faced, which you really are, and you look around at other people. Shockey had the roundest face I've ever seen, just like that. But you adjust to that over a period of time and return to normal. I think we all look pretty normal here this morning, at least did when we were coming out in the bus a few minutes ago. This is the dangerous part. Watch it.
Don't you just hate gravity?
I think CNN right next to, there you go.
Faith or CNN. Senator, what did you and your wife say to each other last night?
Oh, lots of things. Well, those aren't little private things like that aren't to be shared, I think. But Annie was very glad to have me back, and I was glad to see her, obviously, and it was a very touching moment.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Senator Glenn. I'd like to know how much more satisfying this flight was for you than your first, and why, assuming that's so.
Oh, I wouldn't say that one is more satisfying than another. I think the first flight was the first orbital flight we'd ever tried. We were looking at some different things at that time. We're just trying to find out if we could do it or not. You know, do your eyes change shape? Do your vestibular functions get so fouled up you won't be able to function? Can you swallow? Things like that. And we had some research on board back in that time, but it was just, could we do it? And we build on that flight by flight by flight. Up to now, we're up to 120-some flights, whatever it is, manned flights. And now, of course, it's into basic research. We had 83 different research projects on this one flight. Things are of tremendous value, and they're out there on the cutting edge of science, really trying to find out things that will benefit everybody right here on Earth. We had the fun part of it up there, doing that kind of research. Now comes the hard work here of the follow-up on the ground to analyze all that information and data, make it available to everybody. It is valuable. We'll be doing our personal follow-ups on this to learn more things about the human body. In my particular case, we're interested in finding out the parameters of aging and how they match with the parameters of what happens to the younger astronauts up there in space. and what we can learn from that, and trying to learn what the body's, how you turn the body's functions on and off, and things like immunity and cardiovascular changes and balance and coordination and muscle changes and sleep patterns and all these different things that we're just beginning to look into. All of these things are very, very valuable, and we'll be looking into those. So the satisfaction end of it, I got great satisfaction the first time out of just being up there and being the first one to do this for our country. And here I am all these years later. I'm very, very proud and have a great sense of satisfaction of participating with such a great crew as this. This has really been an outstanding crew. And I can't be any more complimentary couldn't be more complimentary to Kurt on how he ran the flight, and to everybody on the flight. Got along so well, nobody was mad at anybody while we're up there, and everybody was working very, very closely together. And now comes the hard part of analyzing all this stuff that will be of value to everybody right here on Earth. And that's the important part of the flight. That's the most important part.
Right here.
Gary Nurenberg, sir, from Tribune Broadcasting. Senator, yesterday, immediately on landing, you had some gracious things to say about the crew, about NASA, and you expressed your thanks to the American people. I wonder, sir, if it imposes on you any further obligation to either the agency or the public that perhaps you hadn't thought about before, and if so, how you would express that.
Further obligation? Well, I have a very definite obligation, having been given this opportunity to participate again, to participate in all the follow-up and make sure that we get all the information and all the data that we were collecting, make sure that whatever my part of that data analysis is and collection and follow-up, that I do the best job I can. As far as beyond that, I don't know. We haven't talked to NASA about follow-up relationships or anything like that. I have no idea what may be in mind in that. But if there are things where I can help out, because I do firmly believe in this program and firmly believe we're getting a lot of good information, and if I can help out in some way and help relay this kind of information back and forth to the American people so they appreciate the importance of it. The things we're doing go into every single home in this country. You could go into any house in this country and point out quite a number of things, or the medical treatment people get, or things like that, where the space program has proven itself in the past. And I think we're just beginning that area. I think it can be more important than it is in the future. And if I can help relay some of that kind of feeling to more people, I'd like to do that. Thank you.
Tony Winton.
Tony Wiggin from Associated Press Radio for Senator Glenn. Could you share with us any unusual experiences that might have happened? Have you been readapting to gravity, your first shower or first meals, or anything that maybe you weren't quite expecting?
Well, it's a funny feeling, as Pedro said too a minute ago. It's a funny feeling to have to walk sort of spraddle-legged and not turn your head. I guess your alligator head. You're sort of locked in like this. You don't want to really turn your head too much outside your normal body motions. And so that's a little bit different. Shower was very welcome. We were doing towel baths or sponge baths up there, of course, and that first shower is really good. I was advised by more experienced space travelers to not get it too hot because some people have passed out in the shower in the past, I guess. But so I was careful in that regard. But coming back to Earth again, getting readapted is, and I'm probably 95, 98% readapted right now, but there'll be a few days before I'm completely back to normal, I'm sure.
Irene Brown.
Irene Brown, UPI for Senator Glenn. Returning to space has been a goal of yours for 36 years. What else do you want to accomplish in your life?
We'll have to analyze that and see where we go. I'm out of the Senate in January, of course. I didn't run for re-election this year, and we have some relationships that are set up back in Ohio with Muskingum College, which is where I went to school, and also Ohio State University, where we're sending our papers, and they have an institute in my name there, Public Service and Policy, that we'll be working some with, and working with the students there. I think I don't worry about the future of this country of ours as far as being taken over from outside. I do worry when so many people have such a cynical and apathetic attitude toward government, politics, things that make this country go, that implement our democracy, implement the Constitution. And I think it's important we not let that kind of attitude prevail for too long, or we will go downhill. So I'll be working on some of those things with the students back in Ohio and elsewhere around the country, and look forward to that.
The lady in the purple.
Edelman, Tribune Broadcasting. Senator Glenn, on takeoff, you were called an American legend. I'm wondering what you would like your lasting legacy to be, your first mission, this mission, or something else altogether? I don't know. I'll leave that up to others to analyze. I've had a number of different jobs. Annie says I have a little trouble holding a job because I've done been in so many different areas. But
we'll see where, I don't know, whatever people want to look at me as, well, that's what it'll be.
Okay, the blue, white striped shirt.
Senator Glenn, Scott Montgomery, Dayton Daily News. Senator, I was just wondering, having looked forward to this and worked for this mission for so long, are you feeling any sense of sadness or regret now that it's the big fun stuff's behind you?
No, quite the opposite. I feel very elated that things went well. We got a lot of the data that we were looking to get, and worked very hard up there. And there's obviously you'd like we talked about before. We'd like to make STS-95B and go right back up again, but that's not to be. And so a sense of accomplishment, I guess I feel, but and a little bit let down that the whole thing is over, maybe, but nothing serious. I'm quite elated at how the whole thing went.
Frederick Castile.
Frederick Castile, BBC French Service, to Senator Glenn. After 40 years of challenges and exceptional life, what is your next challenge? Are you worried to have a life too quiet now?
Well, no, I don't. I think it was Satch Paige, the baseball player, said, "Never look back. Something might be gaining on you." And I sort of guess I've lived my life sort of that way. You don't look back as much as you look ahead. And I don't have any big thing planned now except just what we talked about a moment ago here. Annie has demanded that I spend more of my time with her than I've been able to do in the past. And I think that's a reasonable look for the future also. But I have no big plans outside of that.
Okay, we'll try to get one in the center. Seth Bornstein with Knight Ridder.
Seth Bornstein, Knight Ridder. How did you sleep last night compared to the sleep in orbit and the sleep before you launched? Was it easier to sleep, and did you dream of being still back and up in orbit?
Slept like a log last night. It's interesting though. Well, it was a long day yesterday. We were up about 4 o'clock on local time, I think it was. Is that right, Kurt? About 4 o'clock local time.
Very close to that.
And so by the time when it came past by about 10:30 last night, after a long day, a very, very active day, needless to say, I was very tired last night. So when I went to sleep last night, I really slept very, very soundly. Now, it's interesting, though, we're talking coming out on the bus a little while ago, you notice some differences, though. Up there, you put a pillow up under your head just so you have a sensation of the pillow being against your head like it is on Earth. Last night, my head was down on that pillow, I mean solid. And when you roll over one leg, instead of sort of floating in space like this, one leg was really down on the other. So you notice little differences like that that are rather interesting. But most of the night last night, I slept very, very solidly. Feel great this morning.
Okay, there's a lady in a red.
From Italian television, everybody's talking of you as a legend, as a hero, but that's for the world. What legacy would you like to leave to your family?
I leave all the hero and the legend business to other people. I don't. We've just tried hard all my life to do what I thought needed to be done, or what I was interested in doing, and what needed to be done. And most of my life's been devoted to the country and government service of one kind or another, either in the Marine Corps or in the Senate. And I went through a couple of wars in the space program before and so on. So it's been interesting from where I've been in the middle of it, and how other people look at it, I'll leave up to them. Before time gets away from us here, I just want to say what a great crew this has been. Kurt could not have run a better flight, I don't think. I told him last night he was almost as good a commander as the one I had on my first flight. But let me... This was a superb flight, and he ran it very, very well. He has the right touch to do something like this and did it superbly. Steve Lindsay was the pilot and backed up Kurt on everything he was doing, and did a superb job. We haven't had questions for some of these people yet today, but they deserve every bit as much recognition as any of the rest of us here. Steve Robinson, he was our payload commander on this and did all of the work on all these 83 different research projects, and did just a superb job in keeping everything going, and much of the information we'll get back from all these projects will be because he worked on them exactly just as hard as he did. Scott Perezinski, Count Dracula, I nicknamed him in space because he was one who was after my blood all the time, and along with Pedro. And if any of you have questions on some of those people, get to them. They're the heroes of this thing as far as I'm concerned. They did a really superb job. This was a wonderful, wonderful crew, and I couldn't have been associated with a bunch of better people.
We'll take a question from Mark Carreau from Houston.
I'm Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Again, for you, Senator Glenn, just a question about the pack of double mint gum your family was going to share. Did that happen, and can you just briefly describe that moment?
Well, yeah. Yeah, it happened. I won't go into the moment exactly, but it did happen. There was a little story way back, and I don't even remember what the story was, about somebody was doing something, and the line at the end of it was something like, well, I'm just going down to the store to get some gum. And that started with Annie and me way back in, I guess it was in World War II days, and each time we're going to be separated for a while, why that little story continued. And so we'll have a reprise on that this time. It did happen, and it's just a little thing between Annie and me. I don't know how that story got out. I guess I told some friend about that, and that got into the press one time way back.
Cindy, right behind you, Bruce.
I'm Cindy Russell with WESH-TV out of Orlando, Florida. Senator Glenn, could you tell me, I would assume that you felt an added amount of pressure walking off the shuttle yesterday, wanting to make sure that you could get out and do it on your own, and feeling that immense pressure that the world was watching and wanting to make sure that Senator Glenn made it and made it out strongly, feeling okay, and not feeling the effects that many astronauts have felt after a trip like that.
Well, I wanted to get out with the rest of the crew and do the walk around. I think my determination would have been, if I'd have been on my hands and knees, I was going to do it. But and I wasn't quite to that point. But obviously, I was not at doing my best gait out there yesterday. And when you got out, I was you know, not disoriented, that'd be too strong a word for it, but you're walking very spraddle-legged like this so you can keep your balance, because if you get too far one way, you just can't catch yourself fast enough. So it's the pressure on me was just to be there as a crew member more than it was what any other outside perception might be.
Channel 6.
Senator Glenn, I'm Peter Kaufman from WKMG-TV in Orlando. We were led to understand last night that you had a conversation with President Clinton, 10-minute private conversation. Can you tell us how that went?
It wasn't private, it was with the whole crew. And he called and congratulated everyone, and we talked back and forth. I don't know, what was it, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I guess, something like that. It was very pleasant, and everybody got a chance to talk to the President, and we appreciate his call very much.
Beth Dickey, you can wait for the mic.
Beth Dickey, Newsweek. For the Senator, yesterday the astronaut support personnel were about 20 minutes early going into the shuttle to assist you all out, and the time that you spent in the personnel carrier was about twice as long as it normally is. And as well, your walk-around was quite a bit shorter than normal. Were these apparent changes in procedure to benefit you? And if they were, can you describe for us in some moderate detail what was happening to you during that period of time?
Well, I didn't feel too hot when I got off yesterday, obviously, and it took a little bit more time, and so they wanted to, it wasn't an unusual amount of time as far as I know. I haven't been on one of the shuttle flights before, obviously, and I don't know what the average time is, but as I understand, it's not that unusual that that amount of time would be taken. But I was able to get out and walk around, and was glad to do that. You don't know when you come back whether you're going to be so incapacitated that you're on a gurney in there and being taken care of, and that has happened to a number of people in the past. Fortunately, I didn't have to do that. So if there was some delay, that's all right, but I don't consider that a matter of much importance here. I made it around, feeling great today, and looking forward to continuing on getting the data. I keep coming back to this, getting the data, the purpose of this flight. I see Bob Butler back here, who was head of the first, he was our first director of the National Institute on Aging. And he was, worked with him through the years on some of these different problems. And so we look forward to getting more information to follow up on the flight. The data is just now, it's still being collected. And so we're looking forward to that.
Senator Glenn again. My name's Reg Turnell. I'm 83 and the world's oldest working space correspondent. Do you regard yourself at 77 as the cut-off point, or do you think there's still hope for people of my generation?
Still a lot of hope, and I admire you for still working at 83, and I hope I'm still working at 83 also. I think too often people set their lives by the calendar, they decide that, well, I'm now 60, whatever it is, or 70, or whatever it is, and they decide, well, I'm expected to sit on the couch and do nothing for a while. And that just isn't, that takes the fun out of life as far as I'm concerned. I think people, the longer they keep active, the longer they feel good, whatever they can do physically, and their mental attitude, looking forward, I think that's, you run your life, should run our lives not by the calendar, but by how you feel and what your interests are and ambitions. Old folks have ambitions and dreams too, like everybody else. And why don't they work for them? Why don't they go for it? Don't sit on a couch someplace. That's my attitude.
Okay, right next to Reg.
Senator Grant, Chris O'Connell from Bay News 9 in Tampa. I know you talked about this on the mission, and after giving some time with your wife talking about this, have you really given any consideration on trying to go back into space a third time?
Well, you'd have to check with Annie on that. She's rather firm in her attitude on that at the moment, but probably not. I would imagine this would probably be my last flight, but unless there's some rising demand that I go back up again. But no, Annie is, we've been married a long time. We're coming up next April, will be 56 years. Been married 55 years. And she's been through an awful lot. I owe her a little consideration at this point in life, I think.
Okay, I believe we have a question from Earl Lane. We'll try to take a few in if we can get back there with the mic. Earl Lane from Newsday.
Earl Lane for Newsday for Senator Glenn. You've said that data collection and analysis is now the most important thing, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to sign a waiver for release of pertinent medical information down the line, and also whether you'd be willing to share with us now why you were excluded from the melatonin study.
Well, the melatonin was such a small part of that whole sleep experiment. You know, we were making EEG measurements with the SleepNet. We were doing respiration, deep body core temperature measurements, and electrocardiogram all at the same time. 21 different leads we had coming out of our bodies being recorded, body parameters. And the melatonin that was originally talked about was such a tiny dosage that I thought it was sort of an add-on anyway, to be quite honest about it. And we kidded back and forth with Dr. Zeisler about whether it was adequate to do it, to really learn anything with that, because it was only a very small percentage of what you buy over the counter right now in the drugstore. So when that was taken out of the experiment for reasons which NASA doctors explained some time ago in Houston, and which they get into again, which I won't get into this morning, I didn't think that was much of a reduction in that overall experiment anyway. So as far as a waiver, you get into some waiver of medical records or waiver of specific experimental information are two different things. If you're going to say to NASA people down there when they're assigned to a flight, will you do this kind of an experiment, a certain kind of experiment, and they have to sign a waiver that no matter what happens to them in any regard, that information is going to be public. You're probably not going to have many people signing up, and this is voluntary. NASA doesn't say you have to be on do this medical experiment or you won't go on the flight. Crew members can turn down certain experiments on any particular flight. So I think and then the other type thing is, of course, if you're talking about opening up medical records, everybody's medical history clear back to their infancy almost, whatever the medical records are, that's something else. I'm not sure you or anyone in this room would want all the doctors poring over all of your medical records going way back. So NASA's had a policy of not releasing that information, and I think that's a wise policy. And secondly, on the waiver as far as specific experiments, I think you have to be careful with that in taking out that NASA rule, or you're going to have trouble getting people to sign up for experiments into the future. I think as far as what happened on this particular case, this information will be released as far as the experimental data that we collected will be released, I hope, as soon as possible. If the experimental data that's not going to be held back into the future, because that's the reason we're up there, is to get that kind of information.
What we'd like to do, Owen, I think while everybody's getting out, we'll just do one more question from Stefano.
Stefano Coledan with Popular Mechanics. A question for Senator Glenn. There seems to be an intriguing trend in your reentries. The first time was the heat shield. This time was the parachute. Were you at all nervous, or do you think it was no big deal?
Well, no. Kurt had, anytime you have a change in the spacecraft like that, why, it's of concern, obviously, and NASA was looking at it very, very carefully. We didn't take it that lightly. But Kurt was in touch with them on the ground and got briefed completely on what they thought. And the tests that they were running and looking at, the analysis they were making on the ground, they reported back to him. And he told us what the analysis was, and so I wasn't overly concerned. In fact, wasn't concerned at all. On the first flight I made, when there was a heat shield problem, we made some alterations in the flight plan at that time and left the retro pack on. It burned off during re-entry, which was rather spectacular from where I was sitting because the chunks of it came back by the window. But there wasn't a similarity on that. At that time, I thought there was we did have somewhat of an emergency on that one, and this time I thought it was very well taken care of, very well analyzed, and had no concern about it at all.